to Safety Bytes with James Junkin and Justin Long. The topic of this Safety Bytes, this episode of Safety Bytes, is going to be one that I've been wanting to hear about for a long time. You know, I hear James say a lot of different things, and he's a very methodical person. Usually he doesn't say something, he's put a lot of thought into it before it comes out of his mouth. You know, at the beginning of every year, companies start developing those goals for the year. Beginning right at the beginning of the year, they start setting forth things. And safety culture is an idea that's usually in the forefront of those plans. Right. I figure since we're here in the beginning of the year, January of 2023, and I know you have a pretty strong opinion around the idea of safety culture. Thought it'd be a good time to ask you that question. I want to know from you, what do you mean when you say there's no such thing as safety culture?
So we just go and jump right in the fire.
Oh yeah,
2023, right?
No such thing as safety culture.
Well, I think it's good at this time of year and to evaluate the successes and failures of the past year. Mm-hmm. Where are areas we can improve? Continuous improvement is always part of every safety management system, every quality system that's out there. But I also think language means things. And when I say there's no such thing as safety culture, I don't mean there's no such thing as culture. I think to continue to grow occupational safety and health in terms of addressing the serious injury and fatality trend, we have to stop compartmentalizing safety as if it's some sort of regulatory compliance function of the organization that sits out separate and apart from things like production and quality. People are often shocked to hear me say, not only is there no such thing as safety culture, there's no such thing as safety is number one. Safety is not number one. Safety's never been number one. Our production is not safety. We're not producing safety, but safety is equal to production and quality. You show me a company that has poor safety, I'll also show you a company that struggles with production and quality. They all go together. A company that can solve the great safety puzzle will also solve its production and quality issues. So, but I digress. I get passionate about this stuff. Let's go back to your question about safety culture. Safety culture, and using that terminology, I am not coming after like the soup Nazi of safety for individuals that use the term safety culture. I understand what they mean. We've been taught about safety culture all through our journeys as safety professionals. It's something routinely used in literature. You open the academic journals, professional safety journal, you'll see articles on safety culture. We've been ingrained in the concept of safety culture, and that's okay. What I'm challenging people is, when we use the term safety culture, sometimes that denotes that it is separate and apart from the other culture of the company. And the organization does not have a safety culture over here, a production culture, the accounting department's got their culture, management team has it. We just have a culture, the culture of the organization. And management gets the culture that it deserves. And I think when we're talking about 2023 goals, in order to improve, you have to know where you are. And there are a lot of different assessment tools that are out there that can benchmark, where your company is with related to culture when it comes to safety. And a lot of those are found commonly. Just Google safety culture or culture assessment, and you can get those tools online. But that is a good thing, I believe, for an organization setting its goals. We have to know where we are. But culture does not exist just in safety apart from the other parts of the organization. It all is attached systematically to the leadership of the organization.
So that pretty much solidified it for me. I knew you weren't just out there with some foolish thought like there's no such thing as culture. I knew that, but there's
very much something as culture.
Yeah, I thought it would be a great thing to hear from you.
I never want anyone to think that I don't think culture is important. Culture is important because it represents our values, represents our priorities, In a lot of ways, it represents our priorities when it comes to budgetization. And right now, as we're kind of heading into some unknown from an economic standpoint, you know, are we in a recession? Are we headed into recession?
Yeah.
We got rising unemployment, higher interest rates. You see some of the big publicly traded companies laying people off. Anybody that's been safety for any length of time knows that can become a budget item that gets reduced. Spend can get reduced on things within the occupational safety and health department. So is that a reflection on your culture? It may be, may not be. I'm not here to pass judgment. But in order to set the goals for 2023, we have to know where we are as a culture. And management owns the culture of the organization. So as a safety professional, as you look into 2023 and we're setting those goals, we have to know where we are. And I always recommend getting a good assessment tool and hearing from the people who understand or are impacted the most, and that's the employees. It really doesn't matter what James thinks.
Mm-hmm.
It really doesn't matter what the management team thinks. What matters is the folks that go into the field every day, that encounter hazards, that endure risk, what they think about your total culture. So culture is important. Communication is important. Empowering your employees is important. Listening to your team is paramount. So that's my advice to 2023 safety professionals that are out there looking into setting goals. Let's acknowledge that our culture is not set apart just in occupational safety and health. It's a broader culture for the entire company. Safety is not number one, but it is equal to production and quality. Good companies that are successful, that don't get their people hurt, that value safety, also typically value production and quality. But companies that have poor safety often struggle with production and quality.
Certainly. I agree with you. I couldn't agree more with that. That's good. That's good. You know,
so what do you think about, let me ask you this, rather than just saying I agree with James, what do you think about terminology when it comes to saying safety culture?
Well, I do have somewhat of an opinion on how some societal changes have started treating words in general, right? It's almost like in certain areas we get to where we don't think about the intention of a word, and that's why I like to ask you what you mean, because I know you're a methodical person. But yeah,
I don't know, my wife would say that.
Well, you maybe you're not thought out with her. Maybe you're just careful with me. I don't know.
Maybe.
But there's always seemed to be a lot of thought into it.
Let me throw something out there that just sort of brainstormed I've been thinking about. There's been a lot of discussion around psychosocial hazards and psychological safety. And I think for most practitioners, we're just sort of beginning to learn what that means.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot have a positive safety culture in which you're not talking about and thinking about and addressing and evaluating the risk of psychosocial hazards. Mm-hmm. Psychosocial hazards can exist outside the regulatory framework of OSHA, but they're very impactful. If I don't feel like I'm in a safe place to work, I'm not getting the tools necessary for me to go to work. My time is not being allocated properly, and I'm always in a rush. Hey, you don't think fatigue is a contributing factor in accidents? Of course it is. Of course it is. Go to the Chemical Safety Board and look at all the different instances. Go to the National Transportation Safety Board and look at all the different instances. So when we're talking about culture of a company, from a safety standpoint, it's not just isolated within a specific department and whether or not we're routinely following the rules and regulations of OSHA. I just think culture needs to be expanded beyond safety, and it's really indicative of the entire viewpoint of the organization, the practice of the organization, and it always begins and ends in the office of the CEO with the board of directors. Yep. And it filters down to the employee level. So if you want to keep using the term safety culture, that's fine with me.
I'll stay on it.
Many books that are out there, it's great. I'm not going to condemn you for using it, because I know what you mean. But culture is broader than that.
Which is the point I was making.
Absolutely. As we're getting into the boardrooms, as we're communicating, when we're fighting for budgets, we're trying to express, you know, the psychosocial hazards within our organization. I think we talk about the overall culture of the organization. What are our values? How does production and quality and safety work together? So that's my challenge to safety professionals in 2023. Think of the total culture of the organization. It's not isolated just to the safety department. And we hear terms safety culture all the time, but I never heard the term production culture.
Right.
I never heard the term quality culture.
Right.
Well, it all works together.
So, you know, I've even seen a disconnect from department to department within an organization before, you know, out here consulting with these companies and helping them to do audits and identify like the hazards in their organization and how their employees feel about their own safety culture. I've seen a disconnect not only from the management to the employee level, but I've also seen a disconnect from one division to another. Right? You'll have one division that wants to go ahead.
That reflects frontline leadership. Those disconnects, those lack of feedback loops within the management system itself is what creates dysfunction. That's also what allows for latent errors to be within your safety management system. So, you know, I don't want to get hung up on terminology too much, even though I'm passionate about terminology. Words mean things, and communication is hard, and communication is always a contributing factor in accidents. But as we're looking into 2023, whatever you call it, culture, safety culture, however you term it, you need to know where you are within the organization. That's number one. Continually evaluating where you are within an organization related to culture. What are our values? And here's the other part of that. Values can drift. Culture can drift. We've seen it in organizations we consult for. We've seen it in our own organization. You'll see it in your organization. You know, I don't want this to get off on safety metrics and start talking about total recordable injuries. That's for another day. But past success is not guaranteed of future success. So if we did a culture survey last year and everything was trending in the right direction, is it still trending in the right direction? Are there gaps? So I encourage you as safety professionals, whether it's attitude surveys or whatever type of tool you use to track your culture, be having some type of methodology in order to garner where you are and where you are in the future.
And to kind of go back on what you were saying, I do agree totally. I think it's important that as safety professionals and as you know, a huge part of the communication link in an organization, that we look at intent. We look at the intention of see what we mean by this word, right? When we say safety culture, do we mean that as just the safety department or just how you view this one little thing, or are we looking at it as a total thing? So I think I agree with you, because that's some sound information right there. So certainly. I had another thing I wanted to ask you about while we already in here. Behavior-based safety. Since we're talking about you and your strong opinions, behavior-based safety. I want you to talk to me a little bit on this. We look at, you know, as we progress, and a lot of the books that you really dove off into, a lot of your studies, you really influenced me really towards a systematic way of thinking, looking at the phases of development as opposed just to how people act or how what choices people are making in the workplace. And I kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit about that. Is behavior-based safety even something? How much of that still applies in what we do on a day-to-day basis?
That's a good question, and you're wanting to start a very intense discussion that's very polarizing among safety professionals. And people want you to declare, am I in the behavior-based safety group? Am I in the systems group? Am I in the HOP group? And I'm like, who cares? I'm in the group that gets workers home safe. That's my group. Okay. So to quote Dr. Linda Martin, told me one time, it just depends. It depends. But I will say this.
That comes up a lot. It seems like in safety.
Those that are practitioners of behavior-based safety, if you talk to Scott Geller and you really get down to some of his conversations with Fred Manuel and listen to his discussions back and forth with Todd Conklin, you can find that on YouTube, the great debate they had at ASSP's conference down in San Antonio a few years ago. It's still a systems approach. It's still a systems approach. Where I find once you leave what Scott is saying about behavior-based safety and get to the application in the field, it's too worker focused. So the way it was intended is not necessarily the way it's been applied. Now, there are things that I really like about behavior-based safety. You're looking out for me, I'm looking out for you, we're looking out for each other. But many times it's all worker focused. When in actuality, beyond intentional acts, many times the worker's the inheritor of a system that was setting them up to fail. Right?
Definitely.
The hazards are best controlled in the design phase of the work, when we're designing the work itself. Now, often when we think about prevention through design, we think about prevention through design from an engineering standpoint, right? We're going to engineer, build this machine, we're going to build this process, whatever. But prevention through design can also mean the work process itself. Many workers have been seriously injured and killed because we failed to anticipate human error potential in the design phase of the work. If we design the potential that if a worker makes a mistake, it's going to result in a catastrophe, workers will find it. Why? Because there are all sorts of outside influencers on work. Stress, home life, work life, psychosocial hazards, all the things that come in there, or production pressures that influence the decisions of a worker, fatigue, all those things influence workers' decisions. So when we're looking at a process, the best place to fix and the best place to control hazards is when we're designing the work. That way we don't design the potential for human error in it, because human beings make mistakes.
That's good.
Right?
That's good. Yeah.
So
I agree.
From my standpoint, behavior-based safety, as implemented in most companies, is too worker focused. There are things I like about behavior-based safety. There are things I like about system safety. I'm very much a systems guy. I'm very much a process person. But at the end of the day, if it's working for your organization and you're getting people home safe, don't worry about getting into all these different camps.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's valid. Just from my own experiences being out there working with different organizations, I think you're spot on with that. I mean, companies look at that and they start to really just kind of put everything on at the worker level, be worker focused.
And that kind of brings me up to this as part of our episode. I've done a lot of research. I like to be in the field. I like academics. I like talking theory. I like talking application. And one of the things in this past week, I was doing a trainer for Veriforce in Pennsylvania with a room full of very educated. A lot of them had CSPs. Every one of them been in the field more than 10 years. And we all sort of say the same thing about theory. We enjoy the theory, but often there's not a guidebook to tell me how to implement this theory. It's one thing to tell me we need to have employee involvement. Z10 and ISO 45001 all say we need to have employee involvement, right? Employee participation. But how do I do it? How do I take it and implement these concepts, these systems concepts, these resiliency concepts, the things that Conklin's talking about, the stuff that Decker's talking about? How do I do it? And I think this is one of the best books that's out there by Dr. David Proven. We're giving this away this month. It is the Field Guide to Safety Professional Practice. You want to know how to implement elements of the safety management system within your organization? You want new ideas on how to actually take with limited resources that most safety departments have and go implement initiatives to get people home safe, you want this book. This is one of the best books I've read. A Field Guide to Safety Professional Practice by Dr. David Proven. Now, we gave this book away last year in 2022. We're going to give it away again. So many people enjoyed that book and those episodes. We're going to give it away again. And here's how we're going to give it away again. Go to our YouTube channel and click subscribe. At the end of the month of January, we'll draw from those subscribers, and one lucky safety professional will win a copy of the Field Guide to Safety Professional Practice. You will not be disappointed. You will not be disappointed. So go over to our YouTube channel at Mariner-Gulf Consulting Services on YouTube. Look for a post on LinkedIn with our YouTube link concerning this contest. And I want to congratulate whoever is going to win this particular book
Ahead of
because it
time.
will
Absolutely.
improve your safety practice. Will improve your safety practice.
Well, thank you so much, James, for answering those questions for me. I know I can ask you these things offline. We're in contact all the time. I know I can, but I felt like, usually when I ask these kind of questions, that they add value to me. So I felt like whoever gets to watch this Safety Bite, why not let them go ahead and get that good information and soak up those good details.
Thank you for asking the question, Justin. We're all in this together. We're all growing together.
Certainly.
We're all learning together. Thank you to all who follow us on LinkedIn and on YouTube. Until next time.